This is the tutorial for the third part of the problem-solving connections for Chapter 1, and we're going to end up having to write an equation for Part A here, and it says 2 times, so obviously this represents 2 being multiplied by something. It's being multiplied by the height, so we're going to say that h is equal to the height of this bed, and it says is. Now when you see the word is, that means equals. And then 0.75 more than. More than means we're adding this 0.75 to something. Well, what we're adding it to is the length. So it would look like this if I was to write a formula or an equation. It would be 2 times the height, and then equals, and then 75 hundredths more than. So typically what you do is you write the 75 hundredths, but it goes last in the expression. And we're adding that to the length, so L stands for length. Well, in part, let's see, it would be part 2. We'll say in part 2, look for the length. And in yours, they're asking for the width, but in part 2, we found the length was equal to 1 and 1736. So we're dealing with some tough fractions. And the problem you have, the fractions are a little bit easier to deal with. So 1 and 1736, and I'm going to add it to 75 hundredths. So I'm going to write 75 hundredths as a fraction. And so that fraction is going to end up being 3/4. So 75 cents is the same thing as 3/4. So what I need to do is come up with a common denominator. So I'll multiply the 3/4 by 9/9. So here's my new equation. 2h equals 1 and 1736 plus 27 over 36. And so from this point I can go ahead and add those two fractions together, and I end up with 1, and that makes 44/36. Well, I need to change this to a proper mixed number, so 36 goes into 44 one time, so that 1 plus 1 makes 2 here. Subtracting these two numbers, I get 8/36. Well, I can reduce this, so I can make this fraction a little bit easier to deal with, and so I'm going to take out a common factor of 4. So when I do that, I'm left with, still have that 2h, and it now equals 2 and 2/9. So what I need to do now is solve for h. So I'm going to leave that 2 in front for right now, and I'm going to change this to an improper fraction. So that makes 20/9, and now I'm ready to solve. And so the way we solve is we multiply by the reciprocal. And you see, then those 2's will cancel out. 1/2 of 2 is 1, and that'll solve for h. But I need to do the same thing on the other side. So I do that, and I'll get the answer. H is equal to, well, let's do a little cross-canceling real quick. We've got 10/9. So if I was to change that to a mixed number, 9 goes into 10 one time, and notice how there's 1 left over. So I'm going to just leave it as a mixed number. So h equals 1 and 1/9 feet. So that is the height. Now what they're saying is, well, let's go ahead and write all the dimensions on our box. So we have in the decimal form. So we'll start with the fraction form. 1 and 1/9. And the width they gave us as, let's see, it was 5/6. Now you'd have to look on part 2. So you got to go back, refer back to part 2, and that'll tell you this. So I got that from part 2. And again, the length was 1 and 1736. So I got that from part 2 also. Now, your problem will ask the same thing. It'll ask for decimal form, and it'll be a little bit easier because the numbers will be easier. But basically all I'm doing is doing some division. So for instance, on this one right here, I'm dividing 9 into 1, and I see that it doesn't go there. So I'm adding that decimal point and doing the division. I see it goes in there one time, and I get 1 left over, so I see that 1 repeats. So this one would end up being, the height would end up being 1 and 1.1 repeated feet. And then I do the same thing with the other ones. I'd have to divide 6 into 5, and I do the division, and it ends up going 8 times, and that leaves me with 2 left over, and I end up getting that 2 repeating again, because notice how when I multiply 3 and 6 I get 2 again. So 0.83 is the answer for this one, and the 3 repeats, and that's in feet. And the last one's a little bit tougher, 1 and 1736. So I'm going to do that 36 into 17, and we go 36 into 170 goes 4 times, That makes 144. Doing the subtraction, I'm left with 26. Bring down a 0, and then I have to do 36 into 260. Well, it happens to go 7 times at 252 is the number there, and you got 8 left over. So this is going to be a small number here, and it goes in there 2 times, makes 72, and I get another 8. So I see that repeats at that point there. So the number here for the length would be 1 and 0.47, and then the 2 repeats. So your number obviously will be a little bit different. It won't be repeating decimals, it'll be terminating decimals, because the next question they're asking for the volume. And the volume is when we multiply the height by the width by the length. Basically you're finding the area of the base times by the height. And the decimal form will be easier for you. But since I've got repeating decimals, I can't multiply by the decimals unless I approximate it. And so I'm going to use the exact form. So I'd have to do 1 and 1/9 times by 5/6 times by 1 and 17/36. But again, on your problem, you're going to use the decimal form. So if I was to do this, I would have to change these to improper fractions. 10/9 times by 5/6 we'll start with, and then times by, and then I have to multiply this one out. I get 53 over 36, and then I look for any cross canceling to make the problem a little bit easier. I just see a little bit here. So right here there's a common factor of 2 to make this 5 and this one a 3. So I go ahead and multiply across, and I'm left with 1,325 all over 972. So if I was to change that to a mixed number, it'd be 1 and 353 all over 972, and that is in cubic feet. So that's what the volume of the raised beds are. But again, on your problem, you're going to end up using the decimal form. Use decimals. And it says for part D, what is the total volume for the 6 raised beds? Well, on this one there's 6 of them, so all we're going to do is take the volume of this one here, the 1 in 353 over 972, we're going to multiply by 6 to find out how much the volume is for all 6. So if I was to do it, you're going to do it in decimal form, but I have to use the fractions. So 1325 over 972. I got that because it was right here. That was the improper fraction form, and I multiplied by 6. Well, I'm lucky enough that 6 goes into this number. So let's go ahead and do the reducing. I know 6 goes into it because it's even, first of all. And if I add the digits, 9, 7, and 2, those add to make, this makes 16, plus 2 makes 18. Well, 3 goes into 18, so I know 6 goes in there as well. So this makes a 162 when I do the division. So I have 1325 all over 162. And so when I go ahead and do the division, and that makes, or change it to a mixed number, it's 8 and 89 over 162. That is cubic feet for the volume of all 6 beds. So moving on to the next 2 problems, it says the soil is sold in bags that contain 2.5 cubic feet of soil. And so we're going to write and solve an equation that shows how to find out the number of bags, how many bags there's going to be. Well, let's do this. Let's write down that there is 2.5 cubic feet per bag. And we also know that's going to be the amount sold in one bag. And we also know that we have, if we want to know an unknown number of bags, so we don't know this number of bags, is going to end up equaling, and then we've got our total volume that we have, which was 8 and 89 over 162. This would be our equation that we'd have, because you see the bags will cancel, and we'll divide and by the cubic feet, and those will cancel, and we'll have our answer. So basically we're going to divide by the 2.5. So I need to change that to a mixed number, 2.5 cubic feet, and times by x, and it equals 8 and 89 over 162. So we're ready to do some division here. Now before I do that, I'm going to change this to an improper fraction. So 5 halves x equals, and then I'll do the same thing with this one, This one was 1325 all over 162. So when I solve a problem like this, I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal. You see what happens. Those 2's and 5's cancel out. Do the same thing over here. 2 over 5, and you can reduce. So you see how 5 goes into this 1325. Let's see how many times. We go 265. It goes in there. And then 2 goes into 162. We have 81 times. So we get our number. So x equals 265 over 81. Well, go ahead and do the division, and it comes out to about x equals 3.27, and then it continues on. So that's the number of bags we need. Well, we can't buy 27 hundredths of a bag, or 27 whatever this number is here. So we have to buy, we'll say 4 bags. And that should do us a little bit extra, maybe for next time. So the bags of soil cost $6.25 per bag. So $6.25 per bag. And we want to find the total cost for the 6 beds. Well, we know we have to buy 4 bags, and look what happens. Those bags cancel out. So all we have to do is multiply the 6 and 25 hundredths by 4, and that'll get us our answer. So when we do that work, we end up with a 25, and the decimal moves over 2 spaces, so there it is, $25. And that's how much we'll end up spending on the soil. Those are the problems on that part. Good luck.